Nuclear meltdown. Republicans on the verge of dismantling Senate rules to speed up the confirmation of the president's judicial nominees. China's crackdown on Christian churches. Why a top diplomat is saying China is waging a war with faith but won't win. And an exclusive report about a ministry in the heartland working to build bridges to heal in these partisan times and why they're focusing on pastors. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Congress has to fix our broken immigration laws. We're the laughing stock all over the world. People pour into this country. We stop them because Border Patrol is so incredible. But there's a point at which you can't stop them anymore.
President Trump threatening to close the border with Mexico. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. Jenna Browder has the night off. Well, blaming the Democrats' failed immigration policy and Mexico, the president is vowing to close the door on migrants trying to make their way to America. President Trump took to Twitter this afternoon saying everything from Congress must act to change weak immigration laws, that Mexico makes a fortune off the United States, and that, quote, we will lose so much money with them, especially when you add in drug trafficking. The border closing would be a good thing. Those presidential tweets come on the heels of record migration with people pouring in from Mexico. Customs and Border Protection says the immigration system is at a breaking point. And although the president blames Mexico, that country's president says his government will do what it can.
We respect the position of President Trump, and we will help. We will not say this is the United States problem or this is a problem of Central American countries. It doesn't affect us Mexicans. No, we will help.
Federal officials say the number of migrants at the border could reach 1 million by year's end. Many of those making their way to the United States-Mexican border to escape danger and poverty in South America.
We currently have close to 2,400 people who have joined in this new caravan, but not only this, we are currently reviewing and we have knowledge that a new caravan is forming in Honduras that they are calling Mother of All Caravans. And they are thinking it could be more than 20,000 people.
Well, prior to winning the White House, then candidate Trump campaigned heavily on immigration, often repeating that standard line about building the wall. Well, he again took that message to his base last night at a campaign-style rally in Michigan. CBN's White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us from the White House North Lawn. Ben, you can tell we're getting closer to the official start of the campaign season because the president's trying to rev up his base.
Yeah, John, you're right. It's kind of hard to believe that we're a little more less than a year and a half away, but President Trump highlighted what he continues to call a crisis at the border this month. President Trump declared a national emergency to lock down $8 billion for a border wall by tapping accounts in the Defense and Treasury departments.
We had to go down a little bit of a different path. That's okay. National emergency it is. And if you look at the border and you look at the hundreds of thousands of people that are invading, or at least trying to invade our country, you would know that we need it. And we're building it, and we're building it a lot faster than anybody would, and better, and better.
Now, John, you were talking about this earlier. The Customs and Border Protection Commissioner adds that his agency is at a breaking point.
Well, Ben, opponents on Capitol Hill have made it clear the situation at the border isn't at national emergency level. So why is the president making these claims?
Well, John, turns out the number of migrant families and children entering the U.S. from Mexico is so high that Border Patrol in Yuma, Texas is immediately releasing them instead of transferring them. Local governments are now taking on the responsibility of helping coordinate their housing, meals, and travel. Agents are still doing medical screenings and criminal checks, but the decision means thousands of families will be released without first going through U.S. Customs and Immigration Enforcement.
Not a day goes by that I don't see a report from the field that talks about somebody with an active warrant of arrest, whether it's in this country or from other countries. We had a recent individual from Ecuador. He had an outstanding warrant of arrest out for murder in Spain.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection is reassigning 750 border inspectors from their usual duties to help Border Patrol keep pace with arrivals between the ports of entry. John?
Ben, last night was the president's first big event since the DOJ released its summary of the Mueller report. That gave the president plenty of material.
Yeah, John, you're right. Well, first, Attorney General William Barr said the Justice Department today anticipates it'll be able to release Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report by mid-April, if not sooner. But back to what you just mentioned, President Trump took a bit of a victory lap in Michigan, saying the Russia hoax is finally dead. Take a listen.
And after 3 years of lies and smears and slander, the Russia hoax is finally dead. The collusion delusion is over.
Now, the commander-in-chief did not hold back, took shots at 2020 contenders and at Democrats who continue to probe him. But today, President Trump is not here at the White House. He traveled to Florida to visit Lake Okeechobee to take a look at the dike there that is being built and to highlight the federal and state partnership. He'll pretty much remain in the Sunshine State over the weekend. John?
White House correspondent Ben Kennedy, thanks for that report. Well, in the Senate, you sometimes hear talk about a nuclear option. Well, get ready because it looks like the big red button may get pushed next week, all because Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wants to speed up votes to confirm President Trump's nominees and fill job vacancies. Fallout, however, could be radioactive for both Democrats and Republicans.
This is completely unsustainable.
The minority leader at his wit's end.
A minority of senators have used Senate procedure to systematically prevent the President of the United States from putting a full team in place.
At issue, hundreds of nominations for executive branch offices just sitting vacant.
Not that all these jobs aren't important, but the longer the name of the job, sometimes the further down the list it is.
Senate Republicans claim Democrats' stonewalling is keeping the Trump administration from functioning.
It's outrageous. It has to stop.
While the Senate has pushed through a record level of Trump's judicial nominees, this rule change would not affect Supreme Court or Circuit Court nominations.
It would allow the administration, finally, 2 years into its tenure, to staff numerous important positions that remain unfilled.
Right now, senators can debate over a single nomination for 30 hours before taking a vote. This rule change would drastically cut that time to just 2 hours.
After the Senate votes to end debate, they can continue to debate. And so Senator McConnell believes that that is being abused.
On Faith Nation, the Heritage Foundation's Thomas Jipping told us it shouldn't be this way.
Traditionally, Democrats and Republicans have cooperated to schedule these votes, vote any way you want, and we shouldn't have to go to these extraordinary measures just to have a fair and efficient process.
It's called the nuclear option because there's no going back. But Leader McConnell maintains the rule change is for the greater good.
This is a reform that every member should embrace.
Democrats are crying foul, with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying in a statement McConnell's attempt to, quote, manipulate Senate rules is just another step in his effort to limit the rights of the minority and cede authority to the administration. To the Kentucky senator, nuclear fallout beats the alternative.
Well, let's assume 2 years from now, my side is in the minority, and there's a Democratic president. If we allow this to persist, we'll be doing the same thing to those guys that they've been doing to us. It'll be the new norm.
Well, one source on the Senate floor said the rule change wouldn't exactly create a conveyor belt for confirming nominees and could actually make things worse. That's something McConnell understands, but with so many lower-level nominations in limbo, the majority leader says his hands are essentially tied. Well, the U.S. government is calling on China to end its aggression on people of faith. Sam Brownback, the U.S. ambassador at large for international religious freedom, equated China's recent moves against religious groups with war.
China is at war with faith, but it is a war they will not win. The Chinese Communist Party doesn't seem to trust its own people to allow them to choose their own path for their souls. There's over 1 billion people at stake here.
The crackdown isn't limited only to Chinese Christians. Tibetan Buddhists cannot honor their own religious leaders as they have for more than 1,000 years. China's government also has banned Muslims from naming their children Muhammad, and according to the U.S., has placed about 1 million people from Muslim minority groups in internment camps. Earlier this week at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, Brownback said Christian media's advocacy and storytelling are key to religious freedom worldwide. Well, Ambassador Brownback's comments come as authorities in China's capital have shut down one of that city's most well-known churches. On March 23rd, 20 police officers raided 2 Chuang Church Bible studies and ordered members of the congregation to stop meeting. The church drew almost 1,000 people each Sunday and is now the 4th major underground church shut down by the government as part of an ongoing clampdown on religious freedom. 9 years ago, CBN News was the first television news network permitted to film Chuang Church services. Here's a look at that report from 2010.
Jin Tiangming pastors one of the largest so-called underground churches in Beijing. This is the first time since founding his church 17 years ago that he's opened the service to cameras.
We worship in secret for years. We were spread out across the city, meeting in different people's homes.
Then a couple of years ago, the church decided to come out of hiding. They rented space in a small office building and began meeting together in one location. Liu Gan is an elder in the church.
We brought all the small house churches together in one place, even though it was a huge security risk. But this was an important first step.
Next, they went public.
You want to be so public. You want China to know that you exist as a church, right?
We felt that God was calling our church to be a city on a hill, a light on the mountaintop. To do this, we had to open up.
And joining me now is senior international correspondent George Thomas in our studio in Virginia Beach. George, you were given unprecedented access to Chuang. Tell us about the church and what impressed you most.
10 years ago, they decided to go public, and they invited CBN News to document for the very first time what it was like to be in an unregistered underground church. And it was incredible because the church was just a few miles from the center of downtown Beijing, the so-called financial district. You see the landscapes, the skyscrapers there. The majority of those who attend the church are urban professionals. You have doctors, educators, lawyers, business people, entrepreneurs, all kinds of young intellectuals who were chasing money, chasing other things, but then they had this encounter with Jesus Christ, and it transformed their lives. And this is, you know, a setting where people wanted to come and experience their faith in an open way that was free of harassment from the authorities.
George, can you explain the Chinese government's recent crackdown, its persecution of Christians and other minority religious groups?
It really, truly is remarkable. You know, I've been documenting the growth, the explosion of Christianity in China for the last 25 years. And what the Chinese government, at the root of what their concern is that they are very afraid that, like the United States, Christians will suddenly rise up in the political sphere and challenge the authority. The Chinese are concerned that Christians will suddenly be a threat to the Communist Party. The other thing is that they're concerned that China's Christians are taking on sort of a Western flavor, and they're trying to get rid of Western influence in Chinese Christianity and introduce Chinese characters. In fact, they want to reintroduce the Bible with Chinese characters to reinterpret the Word of God. So it's quite monumental. It is a process. Thousands of churches have been shut down. Hundreds of pastors have been arrested.
George, we just heard Senator Brownback give the government's official statement about what's happening, but what's the Trump administration's response on this?
You know, from Vice President to President Trump, they have been very, very forceful. Unlike any other administration, going back to George W. Bush to President Obama, this administration has really put the spotlight on China's growing hostility against people of faith. Remember, as you mentioned in the lead-in, it's not just Christians. We have close to about 1 million Muslims Muslims who are reportedly being held in these so-called internment camps, re-education camps, where they're telling Muslim men, you're not allowed to grow your beard. They're telling men and women, you're not allowed to take part in the 30 days of fast, which is the whole, during the days of Ramadan, which is core to their faith. And so the administration has been very, very forceful, and they've, from Ambassador Brownback to Vice President Pence, they are putting the spotlight on China like no other administration probably in the last 20 years.
George, we're running low on time, but I want to squeeze in one last question. As you said, you've been covering China for 25 years. How is the Chinese church responding to this persecution?
They are going to grow. The church is going to grow. I've documented it. Every time there's persecution, in fact, there's a famous Chinese pastor who would say in Chinese, more persecution, more church growth. And the idea is that when the persecution comes, the church knows how to grow. They will go deep in their faith. And remember, this is a country for 50 years has endured incredible pressure from the government. They are used to persecution. They are used to torture. Their pastors being arrested, killed in many cases. So the church will grow. And this will, in my opinion, will backfire against the government, because as you persecute the church, they will dig deeper in their faith and they will continue to share the message of Jesus Christ. Remember, the church in China is not a threat to the Communist Party. They want to make their country great, and they want to bring biblical moral principles to the nation of China. They're not against their own nation or their government.
A lot to learn from our Chinese brothers and sisters. George, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's an honor, sir.
Well, today was the day Britain was supposed to divorce the European Union. Instead, Parliament's failure to approve a Brexit deal has upset many in the UK.
People voted to leave. They didn't vote for an agreement. They voted to leave. And the law has us leaving on the 29th of March, with or without a deal. And MPs now come on and say, oh, nobody in Parliament wants no deal. Well, they shouldn't have voted for the Article 50 Act and the Withdrawal Act. They seem not to have read the Acts of Parliament that they've voted for, if that's their position, because that is the law that Parliament passed.
Protesters demonstrated outside Parliamentary Square as the House of Commons voted against Theresa May's unpopular withdrawal plan. Britain now has until April 12th to tell the EU its next steps, whether it'll cancel Brexit or leave the EU with no plan in place. Coming up, the latest on the North Korean nuclear program. Welcome back. President Trump has new plans to meet with his South Korean counterpart to discuss nuclear diplomacy. Part of the April 11th discussion will focus on getting rid of North Korea's nuclear weapons, a topic of utmost importance, as top military officials testified this week that the U.S. isn't ready should relations with the North take a turn for the worse. CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips joins us now. Eric, this new warning can't be good in terms of getting rid of Kim Jong-un's nuclear program.
No, it's not good at all. And really, there is some good news, though, and to go with the bad news. The good news is less tension between the U.S. and North Korea right now. Some would credit that to the diplomacy actions. But the bad news is North Korea still has not kept its promise to denuclearize. The president has made history by meeting with North Korean President Kim Jong-un twice. The U.S. goal to get rid of nuclear weapons in North Korea. But this week, we heard that's not happening.
Little to no verifiable change has occurred in North Korea's military capabilities. These capabilities continue to hold the United States, South Korea, and our regional allies at risk. As such, I believe it is necessary to maintain a postured and ready force to deter any possible aggressive actions.
In fact, South Korean intelligence reports indicate suspicious activity at a factory that supplies nuclear arms to North Korea. Officials also believe satellite imagery shows possible preparations for a launch of some type. While none of this is certain and officials don't want to jump to conclusions, General Abrams gave this reality check to congressional leaders.
As conditions might change, if they change negatively, then our stance and our posture is not adequate to provide us an unblinking eye to give us early warning and indicators.
Earlier this week, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo underscored the concern.
There's obviously a long ways to go. There's more work to do. Chairman Kim hasn't yet demonstrated that he's prepared to fulfill the commitment that he made. But I continue to believe that hard work and diplomatic effort may well get us there.
Diplomacy is creating the opportunity for North Korea to choose the path of denuclearization.
Since that hasn't happened yet, Abrams says the U.S. needs to be ever ready.
We're short to be able to do that if things start to turn bad.
There has been no communication between the White House and Pyongyang since last month's summit ended without a deal. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo hopes a combination of tough sanctions and diplomatic engagement will push North Korea in the right direction. John.
Thanks, Eric. We'll be back with more Faith Nation right after the break. Well, believe it or not, we're still 10 months away from the Iowa caucuses. Democratic presidential hopefuls are already heading to the state to make their positions known and get better acquainted to the folks in one of the most closely watched political states. New polling from the Des Moines Register has Joe Biden currently leading the pack of contenders with 27% of potential voters backing the yet-to-be-announced former vice president. Bernie Sanders is close behind with 25% of Iowan support. Then comes Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, and Beto O'Rourke round out the top 5 in America's first caucus state. Well, in these deeply partisan times, one ministry in Iowa is trying to bridge the division by bringing pastors to the politicians. As CBN's Abigail Robertson discovered, the prayer and counsel they bring to the public debate is bringing a new level of spirituality to the state's capital.
The Bible calls us to pray for our leaders, and that's exactly what a group of pastors is doing every day when lawmakers are in session here at the Iowa Capitol.
We pray for wisdom.
Having a pastor at the Capitol is another day in Iowa. It's just another day. It's as common as a legislator being in the Capitol.
The group meets at a nearby church to pray and discuss what the lawmakers will take up that week. They then head over and start meeting with elected officials from both sides of the aisle.
I do believe that the prayers that the pastors have done for me has helped the issues, settle some of the issues in my home life and helped me to carry those issues as I continue the work for my constituents.
Whether I get to see them personally or if they're here meeting with someone else, it's always good to see that moral support out there.
And they're not just on the state level.
I pray that you would encourage him for the
U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley tells CBN News he's happy to see these pastors following the biblical calling.
I say read 1 Timothy 2:1 and 2, where it says to pray for people in government. And I welcome that.
And he adds one specific request for lawmakers.
What Washington, D.C. needs, and any public official at any level of government needs, is to pray for public officials to have wisdom.
This idea, known as the Church Ambassador Program, started taking shape after the 2012 election, when Bob Vanderplaats, president of the Family Leader, felt a deep change was needed.
We really did a gut check. We looked at ourselves in the mirror and said, you know, what is this all about? And that's when we said, we need to authentically engage the church. We need to be about cultural transformation. And the only way we're going to get cultural transformation is if we lead with the gospel.
And that includes bringing faith and political leaders together. While the pastors don't bring a political agenda into the Capitol, they're available to add a faith-based perspective to issues. Greg Baker, who leads the pastors in each day, has seen legislators change their stance after prayer.
We had a legislator that completely turned 180 on a pretty controversial issue last year in regards to abortion. Completely turned 180 by relationships with pastors.
Baker maintains the key to success is remaining nonpartisan.
Our end goal isn't policy. It's not favoring one person or the other. Our end goal is a relationship.
While hundreds of pastors from around Iowa take part in the program, they only take a small group into the Capitol on a daily basis.
One of the things we're seeing is that the spiritual temperature at the Iowa Capitol, it's at an all-time high.
The Family Leader is partnering with people who will bring this to other states, like Ohio.
In some senses, it's the most common sense thing. It's relationship.
The Ambassador Program is just one part of the Family Leader's broader Daniel initiative that aims to engage more Christians in politics and government.
When that trust gets built up, we do believe that our voice then does matter in elections. Our voice does matter in policies, and we want to see that happen. But it's not hijacking the church for a political gain. It's not hijacking the church for a candidate win.
And since they're seeing positive results, they're already planning to expand into states like Minnesota, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, and Florida. The pastors are now regular fixtures in the Capitol, and during the 4 years they've visited, only 5 members have turned down their offers to pray with them. Reporting from Des Moines, Iowa, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight, and have a great weekend.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.